Get started. Hello. And, all right. And welcome to tonight's debate between candidates for mayor of Deltona. I'm Pat Rice, editor of the News Journal, and I'll be moderating tonight's debate. I want to thank you for attending, and I also want to thank the staff of the Center at Deltona for putting a lot of work into getting this place ready a couple hours before we all got here. So let's give the staff a hand. Before we get started, if everybody could rise so we could say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So we'll get started in just a minute. Just a couple of housekeeping things for everybody. One is please put your cell phones on silent if you haven't already. Everybody who's here is welcome to film, record, however you want to do it, the debate itself. But if you could just do it without disrupting other people. A reminder, too, that the point of tonight's debate is for these three candidates to share their viewpoints with you. And that's especially true for those of you who are undecided. You can certainly applaud an answer. I would expect that if somebody you support says something you support, that you would applaud. But please, if we could be respectful and civil to every candidate that is up there. So what that means is I'd like you to refrain from booing and interrupting candidates as they speak. The evening really is for the candidates to answer issue-based questions that I think are hard questions, but I want to keep the focus on the candidate. And before I introduce them, I want to give you just a little information about the format. This is a little different than the other debates that we've held over the last couple of weeks. So the candidates have agreed that at 2 points in tonight's debate, a designated audience member for each of them will ask a question of their choosing of one of the candidates. So the way the debate will go is like this. I'm going to ask some questions at the beginning. Then the audience members are going to ask some questions. And then I'm going to ask some more questions. And then the audience members are going to ask some questions. And then hopefully there'll be enough time for me to wrap things up. Once we get going, I think it'll all make sense. And if we could have the three audience members just stand so everybody knows who they are. It's Jamie Jessup, Edla Santa, and Courtney Young. Let's give them a hand. Okay. So in all cases with all candidates, each candidate is going to answer every question, and they will all get the same amount of time, 90 seconds, to answer the questions. And to make sure they stay on time, we have a timekeeper, and that is our veteran reporter, Dinah Pulver. Dinah, do you want to say hello to everybody? So candidates, when Dinah holds up the yellow card, that means you have 30 seconds to finish speaking. And when she holds up the red card, that means you bring your comments to a close. If you don't bring them, I'm not going to be rude, but if you don't bring them to a close pretty quickly, then I'll help. So that's how we'll do it. So let's introduce the candidates in alphabetical order. Santiago Avila Jr. was born in Chicago, but has lived in Deltona and been active in the community for several years. He's a former youth pastor who's gone on missionary trips to Puerto Rico, China, Mexico, and Ecuador. Mr. Avila is also the owner of a small business, and he is, I believe, also a student of Phoenix University. Correct. Please welcome Mr. Avila to tonight's debate. Heidi Herzberg was born in Milwaukee and has lived in Florida since 1983. She was a small business owner for 13 years and she is an alumni of Daytona State College. Ms. Herzberg has been a member of the Deltona City Commission for the past 8 years, and she is the city's board member on Team Volusia and president of the Volusia League of Cities. Please welcome Ms. Herzberg to tonight's debate. And last, but not least, of course, is Troy Shimkus. Mr. Shimkus has been a resident of Deltona for 2 years. He was a band director and teacher in Lake County earlier in his career, then became a district trainer. Over the past decade or so, he has worked in the technology field with a focus on data analysis. He has a passion for helping people learn and grow and achieve success given the right tools. That's off his campaign website. Please welcome Mr. Shimkus to tonight's debate. Okay, let's get right to the questions. And we're going to do the questions in alphabetical order. So, Mr. Avila, you'll get the first question. Deltona, speaking of water and sewer, Deltona has the highest combined water sewer rate among cities in Volusia County, nearly $30 a month higher than the next closest city at the 5-gallon level, usage level. And there's a recommendation to increase monthly bills by about $14 a month by 2021. There also is an active petition drive for a state audit of Deltona's water department. If you become mayor, would you ask the city commission to request a state audit of the water department?
If I become mayor, absolutely. I will ask for a full audit, not only the water department, but of the whole city.
All right. Is that it?
Was there another question?
No.
I heard one question only.
That was straight and to the point. I'm not used to candidates being that quick.
Guys, one thing you'll learn from me, I'm not a politician, so if I give you a straight answer, I mean, that's what I thought we should be doing up here.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Herzberg?
Thank you. Thank you for asking the question. It's a very good question. Absolutely, Deltona has higher combined water and sewer rates than any other municipality in Volusia County and surrounding regions. And that is because with about 34,000 customers on Deltona water, there's only 6,500 on sewer. And consequently, you have a much higher rate for the sewer payer than you do for those that are just on water. And with more and more construction and subdivisions coming in, the subdivisions will be, if they're close to the sewer line, the new subdivisions will be hooked up to sewer. And that will go ahead and hopefully add another 1,000 or so homes to sewer, which will slowly bring down the rates. The question concerning the audit, absolutely. I signed the petition for Deltona Strong that wants to do the audit, and I am 100% transparent. I totally agree that we should audit. I have no problem with it whatsoever. And as your mayor, I would support any transparency and clarity and a full audit.
Thank you. Mr. Shimkus.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I, as well, would support a full audit. I have also signed the audit that Deltona Strong has been putting forward. But I think it's important for us to remember and realize that the biggest factor that's driving our water rates are the debt bonds that we have. The bond covenants are the responsibility of the city to maintain 110% of all revenues in the water department. So until we address the bonds and the debt level that the city has, the rates increasing will be a necessity for us to remain in control of those bonds. So we need to make that important.
All right, thank you. Next question, and this goes to you, Ms. Herzberg. There's also a move afoot to change the city charter so that there can be no forced sewer. But the city hasn't, as far as I can tell, taken any step to force residents with septic systems to hook up to city sewer. And beyond that, if the state or federal government, for environmental reasons, let's say, came to Deltona and said that its residents must hook up to city sewer, or that they need to replace or modify septic field, wouldn't that supersede anything in a city charter? Explain your position on this issue and just go from there.
Absolutely. Thank you again. Very, very pressing question and one that needs to be addressed. So nowhere in our budget has this commission or any past commission ever put in anything, any funds to be set aside to convert septic to sewer. The city of Deltona is 41 square miles, 450 miles of roads, and again, very, very limited areas that have sewer. Those are the old Mackle Brother areas that were sidewalks, sewer, and so forth. In order for the city to actually fund sewer conversion from septic, you would need more than $500 million to do something like that. It is cost prohibitive, and again, nowhere has this commission or any past ever even looked at the funding. Going to the fact of the state actually has the power to mandate that you clean up your septic areas, those areas that are in the spring shed, and they have the power to say that you have to convert from septic to sewer. That has not come down yet, but I can assure you that as your mayor, I would fight anything that requires an unfunded mandate to the residents of Deltona. The residents of Deltona cannot afford to do that. The water company cannot afford that, nor can any other resident in our neighboring communities. Orange City, DeBerry, they would all be affected as well. So I would vow to go ahead and say the state needs to provide the funding to do something like that. We can't afford it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Shimkus?
So definitely, I would say I would believe that the city is not responsible for forcing homeowners into any kind of scenario like forcing them onto sewer or forcing them into any kind of high dollar process like that. It's also important to know, Ms. Horsberg is correct, the amount of excuse me, the amount of effort and resources it would take to even roll out a sewer system across the city is mind-boggling. But what's more important to realize is that the state is less likely to force that at this moment because they are now focusing more on enhanced septic systems. And if you read through the BMAP, the Volusia Springs BMAP, and what they call the priority focus area, which takes about half of Deltona, is in this priority focus area. When you, as a septic owner, need to either repair or replace your septic tank, you have to get a permit from the Department of Health. It does not involve the city at all. But the Department of Health is the one that's going to tell you what kind of septic tank you must use. And these new enhanced septic systems that are going to be required are quite a bit more money than the ones you may have now. So there are cost-sharing opportunities for these enhanced septic systems. And I do believe that any mandate that comes down from the state that pushes any city in toward more toward sewer or more toward anything, if we get to that point, we need as a city to work with our government, work with the county and the state on the cost-sharing opportunities that would allow homeowners to have a better opportunity to afford something like that. But it's just as important to realize that the Department of Health is more responsible for determining whether or not you can get a sewer or a septic permit and what the requirements are for those permits.
Thank you. Mr. Avila?
Okay, so this is where I'm the non-politician. I believe in putting a charter amendment so we can kill this debate already. This question, and I'm sorry, Pat, you guys are usually on the east side, so of course you haven't heard of the no to force sewer thing. It's been going on since Mayor Masarcik and Zenaida Denizak have been running against each other, the no to force sewer. You know, Ms. Hertzberg sits here and she says that she supports doing a water audit. Why does she have to make all these people work for signatures? She can call right now for the water to be audited. She doesn't do it. And I'm not trying to attack her specifically, I'm tired of all this political nonsense. Guys, there's a $28 million sewer plant that was built. How do you think they're going to get you to pay for that? It's not that the state wants to mandate you on it. It's the city. I don't care how they can sit there and tell me to the red in their face, they're not going to force you onto sewer. For a long time, Alcantara wanted just a simple resolution, and nothing happened. All of a sudden, somebody's running for office, and they want to pass some type of thing to say, an ordinance to say that there's not going to be force, they're not going to force you onto sewer. Be honest about it. Why don't you pass a charter amendment? That way we can kill the topic.
Thank you. Heidi, I don't know if you wanted to respond in any way. If you do, take 30 seconds.
Absolutely. Concerning the $28 million sewer plant, the reason that secondary sewer plant was built was because the Fisher plant was nearing capacity. There's a timeline that the state mandates that you have to, when you're at a certain capacity, you have to look for land, you have to have plans, and then you have to go ahead and purchase another sewer plant and put that up. That is what we did, because otherwise you are not allowed to hook up not one more business, not one more subdivision. You in fact stifle your growth completely, because the state, again, mandates what you can do for capacity.
Mr. Avila?
Just really quick, how many here are actually residents in Deltona? Do you guys see all the businesses booming by the Deltona East Side sewer plant? Because I've missed it. Just saying.
Okay. We'll come back to economic development, and you'll have a chance to sort of go deeper into that in just a little bit. So, Deltona. This question goes to Mr. Shimkus. Deltona is Volusia County's largest city by population, over 90,000 people. But it lacks significant commercial business. According to the Property Appraiser's Office, this was figures that he gave me yesterday, commercial property makes up just 6.6% of the city's tax base. That compares to Daytona Beach, where commercial property makes up 34.3% of the property tax base. Now, that lack of commercial development here puts a significant burden on Deltona's residential taxpayers. And this isn't a new issue. This is an issue that's been going on, I think, since the city incorporated in the early 1990s. So the question is this: what can the city do to attract more commercial development? And has Team Volusia, which the city pays thousands of dollars a year to, done enough to earn that business from the city, to earn those dollars from the city? Mr. Shimkus.
Thank you. So from being at all these meetings in the City Council or Commission for the last 2 years, I have personally not seen any evidence that the Team Volusia work has been a big impact in Deltona. They have brought jobs to other areas, and I'm sure that some of our residents have gotten those jobs in Daytona Beach or the surrounding cities, but it has not had a significant impact here in Deltona. And I would like to really reevaluate that relationship on its face. As far as the tax base issue, commercial growth is very difficult for our city for a lot of reasons, but when you have such a small amount of land to work with, it's really important that we focus our development in those areas on higher energy, higher dollar type of businesses. We need to focus on emerging industries like healthcare, technology, some light manufacturing, energy, those things that are going to bring the higher paying jobs that are going to offer the more ancillary work as well. Because when you bring in these high professional industry jobs like that, you're going to get a much better base to work from, and it's going to make that 6% work a little bit harder. So we're not trying to cram a lot of low paying jobs into a smaller area. We can use that area more smartly to get a better tax base that's going to kind of help us sustain our growth for the future and provide jobs for the people in our city that are begging for better jobs to help raise their own families.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Avila?
Regarding Team Volusia, look, Team Volusia has been collecting about $40,000 from us every single year, and they've brought 0 jobs to Deltona. I'm sorry, I believe in Deltona residents first. I do not believe in regionalism like they do in City Hall. With me, it'll be very simple. First quarter, nothing, it goes from 40 to 30. Second quarter, it goes from 30 to 20. First, it goes from 10 to 0. If Team Volusia is not going to bring any jobs, we need to stop using taxpayer monies and throwing it out in the trash. It's not our money. It's theirs. It's that simple. Secondly, we need to get Deltona out of the bit. Look, we're not here to create business. We're supposed to, job creators create businesses, not us. And I have not seen yet anybody on that dais that's been anywhere near friendly to businesses. So the healthcare has come on here. It had nothing to do with the people up there in that dais. You know, Deltona needs, we need a hospital, we need a lot of things, but we're not business friendly. We're not open for business like they say. So we need to change that atmosphere. We need to change leadership. And if we keep continuing going down the same path of the same ideas, the same leadership, Deltona is never going to move forward, and we're never going to get a higher commercial tax break so that we can even out what the residents are paying.
Thank you. Ms. Herzberg?
Thank you, Pat. Concerning Deltona's disparity and the tax base being on the backs of residents, it is about, like you said, 90% residential. And unfortunately, in the years with the recession and following the recession, Deltona was devalued 62% by the property appraiser. We were devalued 20%, 20%, and then 22% in residential property. And that right away puts us at an even bigger disadvantage. So when you look at economic development in the city of Deltona and regarding Team Volusia, you look at what we have for product. And right now, Team Volusia does not only do the recruitment for the entire area for Volusia County. And it's true, we have not received any brick and mortar. We have not received anything in terms of a solid business that's come into the city and actually built here. But we have had other businesses in the area that have been brought in through Team Volusia and through expansion through Volusia County that our Deltona residents work through. As someone that's been on the commission for 8 years, I can tell you that our biggest challenge in Deltona is the lack of product that we have. And the lack of product, I mean the lack of commercial land and how to go ahead and market that. And when you do that, the city's not in control of that land. That's private landowners that are in control of that. And what we can do is incentivize. We can make it easier through permitting. We can make it easier through the development process, which we have done. But to go ahead and try to incentivize private landowners and bring business in, you really have to have the product available. Thank you.
Okay, I want to just do one quick follow-up to each of you, and then we'll get to the audience question. It seems like Deltona has quite a bit of privately owned land at 472 in Howland. What is it, Mr. Shimkus, that the city can do to create this sort of development that any city this size in Florida has, that near the interstate where there's that much open land?
Well, I think it's more about talking with those landowners, because it is up to them, of course, what they do with their land, but showing them that we are working with other industries and helping them understand that there are opportunities in those other industries, again, like healthcare, technology, the energy industry, where we can create new and better opportunities using their land, but they have to see value in it, and it's up to the city to be able to show them that there will be value, there will be a future, there will be opportunities that are for them, because I think a lot of times they're going to wait as much long as they can because they want to get, of course, the best they can for their land. So it's really about building those relationships and having those conversations with them and the surrounding the citizens in the area to find out, what the best opportunity for that land is.
Okay, Mr. Avila.
There's a lot of things the city can actually do. For one, like I said before, they can be business friendly. Make the process a lot more simple. When big businesses come or mom and pop stores try to open, I've spoken to so many residents that want to try to start a business, and the list that they get is unbelievable. And I think most of that has to do with a city manager that likes to micromanage everything. So we could possibly start by getting Jane out of Deltona.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure we'll come back to that issue as well. Ms. Herzberg?
Yes, again, you have multiple landowners. Right now, I know Team Volusia is working with Deltona Village. The city has, changed their zoning to go ahead and make things a little bit easier for them to have different types of product there that they're going to be able to build. We recruited Halifax Health, and that is definitely jump-starting in that area. I'm sure many of you came in and saw the hospital building going up there, and that is going to bring ancillary services in. We had a distribution center that was interested in coming at 472 and I-4, and unfortunately, they only wanted a portion of the land. They only wanted, I believe, 50-some acre, or they wanted the 50-acre parcel split. The landowner didn't want to do that. The city can't incentivize those kind of things if your property owner wants to either hold out for something different, doesn't want to sell, or you have multiple property owners that you have to bring together. And the way to do that is through recruitment, and it is through agencies like Team Volusia. It is working with the county and on all your localities. So that is really what you want to do.
Thank you.
Commissioner Herzberg. City Manager Jane Shang was quoted in the News Journal as bragging about Hardee's, Dunkin' Donuts, Burger King, and other types of businesses as being positive economic development. Commissioner Herzberg, why should we want to elect you for 4 years for mayor when your first 8 years haven't been that productive in this area?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you again for the question. When you look at productivity, you can say that maybe a Dunkin' Donuts or a Hardee's is not maybe what some people find a good restaurant or a good economic development thing to come in, but it is a commercial tax base, and you're taking that vacant land and you're going ahead and upping your commercial tax base. That's number one. Number two, when I first got elected to this commission, we hit the worst recession that this area has seen in a long, long time. We saw a lot of foreclosures. We saw a lot of businesses go out. We saw a lot of land that was for sale on Howland Boulevard long before I got on the commission. It didn't sell during the boom, and it certainly didn't sell during the bust. And that is what the market will hold. That is something the city can incentivize, again, to a degree. And when we have to do baby steps, we also have to look at, with economic development, you have to look at your infrastructure. We had a Dunkin' Donuts that wanted to go in at Saxon and Finland. There's no sanitary sewer there for commercial businesses, so they're not going in. And again, a Dunkin' Donuts might not be what everybody wants, but that is a flag to let you know that if a Dunkin' Donuts is not going in there, nothing else is either. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shimkus?
I mean, I would just kind of reiterate that it's important to talk to people and understand what kind of development they want. We need to look at these other industries. We have a lot of gas stations and dollar stores and these kind of fast food restaurants, but we need to proactively go after and look at, and I understand that, the city is not responsible for selling the land or opening a business and all of those things, but we are responsible for creating an environment that is conducive to people doing business. And part of that is absolutely the fact that our city hall has a kind of a reputation of being very difficult for builders to deal with. And a lot of that comes back down to some basics of customer service training. When you go into City Hall and need something and you have to deal with 5 different people and you never know when you left it and how you left it, that's very difficult for anyone to kind of work through that process. So we need to look at a lot of things. And one big part of that is going to be, we need to kind of restructure the entire process of how City Hall works so that when you walk in, you deal with a single person. They walk you through the entire process. They talk to you about what you need, what the requirements are. And if you have to go and talk to someone else, that same person you talked to originally calls you back the next day. Hey, did everything go okay? Did you get what you needed? So we need to look at redefining how we as a city do customer service. And we also, again, I'll keep saying, we need to look at other industries. There are a lot of opportunities in the energy, technology, med technology. These are fields that are emerging, that offer a lot of growth, that offer a wide range of opportunities for professionals, and then all the ancillary things. If we have professional office buildings, that will be this mysterious lunch crowd that we always hear about that's not here. But we have those opportunities, and those are what we need to pursue.
All right, thank you. Mr. Avila?
So one of the things that I talk about on my website, and I've spoken to a couple other people before, is, one of the things to help bring business as well is trying to create some type of community sense, like a downtown Deltona. Something where the residents, unlike the building that we're in now, can participate and be part of, where they can actually take place in when they have community events. And, maybe we can get different lawyer offices to come in, architects, things like that. We need to look also at higher paying jobs. Dunkin' Donuts are great, dollar stores are great, but we need higher paying jobs. We need blue collar jobs. Deltona needs to get out of this average household income that doesn't break $40,000, regardless of what anybody tells me. And we're not going to do that by continuing to open Dollar Trees, dollar stores, Family Dollars. It's not going to work that way.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to the next question from Ed LaSanta. Ed?
Good evening. This question is for Mr. Shimkus. You talk about Deltona's debt level. How will you pay it down based on the actual city's debt structure?
So we have somewhere in just our utilities, somewhere around $163 million in debt when you combine all of the principal and the interest that we're going to have to pay over the next 30 to 40 years. The important thing to do is to work on getting rid of that. And the one way you can't do that is by building a bunch of shiny new things. Like, as beautiful as this building is, I do believe it was a mistake for the center to be built in the current way that we have so much debt. Adding another $9 million to our debt, I don't think was the best idea. I also want to say that when you look at the debt covenants, we have to understand that those are what's driving all of these rate increases for our water. And until the debt covenants are gone, which means the debt is gone, we can't get past that. Now, the way we do that is if you listen to some of the commission meetings, you'll see they keep talking about this $14 million unencumbered revenue. I don't know how we can have unencumbered revenue when we have so much debt. So I really want to see a rededication to, when we have these surpluses, they need to go directly to paying down this debt. I think it's really difficult for a city to continue to build this debt when we bring in somewhere around $14 million a year in property taxes, and we have, again, 160 some odd million dollars of debt just in the utilities. That does not include the resolving state funds and the other non-utility based funds that are out there as well. So I think that's what we can do, is take this unencumbered, which again, I don't know how we have unencumbered money when we have so much debt, but move that to the debt, and let's get us away from the debt as fast as possible so we can make better choices for our future.
Thank you. Mr. Avila?
You know, I hear almost every single year that we somehow have a surplus out of nowhere. And I've had to agree. I mean, instead of, you know, talking about where we're going to add this money and where we're going to spend it, how about we start paying down some of our debt? I've gone through city budgets and I look at the massive spending sometimes just because the city of Deltona doesn't have a procurement department. Okay? That's just one of the bigger ones. The Fisher plant, why do we need to continue to have the Fisher plant up and running? Why can't we decommission it and possibly even sell that land? That can be another way that we use to pay down the debt, use the money from the sale of that, and use it to pay down some of the debt from the other sewer plant. We need to start, you know, thinking outside of the box. If we want to have a future for Deltona, we need to start thinking outside of the box and stop using the same old policies and procedures that we're used to doing.
Thank you. Ms. Herzberg?
Thank you. Once again, I'd like to go ahead and just quick address the Fisher plant. The Fisher plant, if you were to decommission the Fisher plant, you'd have to do a lot of remediation, and you would have to put a massive lift station in there to go ahead and take all the sewage and everything that's pumped through that. You would have to go ahead and put some sort of a large lift station in there. So it would not be economically feasible, and nor would you make a profit on that land. It's all residential, and it would be residential. I live a block and a half from there. I know exactly where that is. You would really have to do that. Your better shot for Fisher is to go ahead when I-4 beyond Ultimate comes through and they continue to widen Saxon, do like Altamont Springs did. Go ahead and take the stormwater capture that Altamont, instead of putting retention ponds along Saxon, take the stormwater from there, run it through the Fisher plant, run it through the Rib plant, and create some more reuse water. That's just as a side note for that. But when you're talking about debt, we have we have about $124 million in our water department in debt. We have about $4 million in bonds in stormwater. We have about $26 million in transportation bonds. Our general fund was always debt-free up until this last 2 years when we went ahead and built the center. We have $7 million in debt there. The debt service on that is $403,000 a year. That's out of your general fund debt. The rest of the debt that we have is in enterprise funds, and it is a dedicated revenue source. The $26 million for transportation, that is paid by your gas tax. The stormwater, the $4.6 million in stormwater, that is paid by the $108 that you have on your tax bill every year for stormwater, and the water is paid through the water company. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And our final audience question for this round is Courtney Young. Courtney?
Okay, general question, no direction to anybody in particular. We've talked about forced sewer being an issue, constant issue, and that several of you have expressed the want or desire to change the city charter. What other changes to the city charter would you hope to initiate with the commission to create a foundation that would balance the responsibilities of the government with the needs of the people?
All right. Well, why don't we start and do that alphabetically to Mr. Avila?
So here, one of the ideas that I think would be very reasonable for Deltona. Deltona is a city manager form of government. I believe the city manager should be put on the ballot at least every 2 to 4 years because, you know, you can replace the mayor all you want, but if you keep the same city manager, your direction is never going to change. So an amendment that I would love to see on the ballot is for the city manager to be put up for a vote by the residents of Deltona. They're doing a good job. We continue to have the same city manager. If they're not, they're going to the unemployment line.
All right, thank you. Ms. Herzberg?
Thank you. Again, a good question, and I have been through one charter review where the city commission and the charter review committee has brought several items forward for charter review and put them on the ballot, whether or not the city manager and the city attorney should be living in the city and so forth, and just other cleanup amendments. And my view on amending the charter, you have to look at the charter as your constitution, and what you put in there has to be reversed only by another ballot measure. So when you put something in the charter, you keep that for a very, very long time, and consequently, think long and hard what you want to put in there, because initially when the city, one of the charter review committees, the city manager and the city attorney did not need to live in the city. A charter amendment went ahead and made that a requirement. And that can be good and it can be difficult. It can close your pool of candidates and maybe it cannot. So those are things for me. You can go ahead and put a charter amendment on to say that the city should not force residents onto sewer. If you want to go ahead and do that, the city has, again, no desire to do that, no funding to do that. But when you put that charter amendment on there, understand that the state supersedes, as does the federal government, anything that you choose to put on there. And that's my view with looking at constitutional amendments for the state constitution as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shimkus?
So about a year ago, the first thing I did when I got, the first, introduction to city government I got here in Daytona, I started working with a group of people that were working on changing the charter and putting in some new amendments. One of those, very similar to what Mr. Avila has mentioned, we wanted to memorialize the idea that the city manager needs to go through a very thorough evaluation every year by the commission, and it has to be a public evaluation. It has to be done where everyone has to be able to see what each commissioner has to say about the city manager, and that it does have, as a teacher, I went through evaluations that were 100 times, more than what we just saw come out about our current city manager, and that needs to be done at this level. It needs to be a very thorough, very deep kind of evaluation about the city manager, and done yearly and publicly. The other kind of opportunities we looked at to change the charter were dealing with the Nona Forest Sewer. That was one of the things that they wanted to put in there, but also one of the biggest things I think we need to put back into the charter, because I believe it was in there and has been changed, is requiring a voter referendum for any debt that the city will undertake. We currently have no restrictions on our charter about taking debt that is tied to water and sewer rates. There is a reduction about if it's tied to general tax revenue, but if they can tie the revenue of the debt or the service of the debt to a bill you're already paying, whether it's a fee, a tax, or water rate, then they're free to do that. And I think we need to take that power back and put it in the people's hands, so that if they decide they want more money again to do something, that we all have a choice about that.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go to you with the next question, Mr. Avila, and if there's something to address, Sarah, then go ahead. And let me preface this question by saying I try not to ask questions that are perceived as personal questions, and this isn't personal toward you, but it does involve a city employee, Jane Shang. So with that in mind, City Manager Jane Shang has come under increasing heat for a perceived contentious relationship with some citizens and some former city employees. City Commissioner Anita Bradford has now called for the FDLE to review recent City Hall actions that led to Sheriff's Office actions against 2 citizens. But with the exception of Bradford, Ms. Shang's most recent performance reviews in July were quite positive. So with all that as the background, what is your assessment of Ms. Shang's job performance? And if you became mayor, how would you address that?
Okay, so I'm going to touch on something really quick, and then I'm going to answer your question. Number one, guys, don't let people fool you. If right now there's something in a charter that says that city manager or the city attorney has to live in Deltona, Mr. Fowler and Ms. Marsha, they don't live in Deltona. Just keep that in mind. So regarding Jane Shang, I personally sat down with every single department head before they all exited the city. And for the most part, they've told me without mentioning their names or anything like that. Some, had positive things to say, but some were very concerned. They were very worried. They were afraid to speak out. Some of them look, one of the people that I spoke to said that they no longer come to Deltona for family festivities in the holidays because they cannot stand to be in the city because of the way they are treated. My thing is simple. How will I go around this? And just to give you a little fact check, it's not a perception. It's not something that's perceived. She has been very contagious with a lot of our residents. How will I fix it? The very first thing I do once I take the oath of office, I will sit down and I will call for a vote of no confidence on Ms. Jane Shang so she can leave Deltona without a pay.
Thank you. Ms. Herzberg?
Thank you again for asking that question, because I think that with all the things in the newspaper and things that have been going on, I think it's a very, very important question to ask and to talk about. In Deltona, we have a council management form of government, which means we have a commission and we have a manager that manages and does the day-to-day operations of the city. And we also have a process that we go through with not only evaluations, but with management and how we handle that. And in the light of the recent events, and including Commissioner Bradford asking for an investigation, I completely support, again, as I said before, any type of investigation, any type of audit, because it absolutely needs to be done. That's number one. Number two, we have to go through a process. With both things that happened with both of the residents, it went through a process. The process was to look at what happened and hand it off to the sheriff's department and hand it off to the state attorney. And if they choose to go on further from that, then that is out of the city's hands. And in terms of the city manager, we also have a process there. We don't shoot from the hip and aim later. Because if you don't go through the process that you have, you will ever not, in the future, you will not be able to really attract good quality managers and employees if you do not go through the proper process. We're innocent until it goes through the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a moment. Mr. Shimkus?
So I think many of us here would have loved to see that support in the form of a second for that motion that she made. To me, it's not a personal thing. I have nothing against our current manager. I've met with her. I have nothing against her personally. But what to me it is it's a managerial issue. And what I see in the last few years in Daytona is a managerial style that is not conducive to the betterment of our environment, of our city. I see, so I got here, and over the last two commissions, 5 separate commissioners have accused the city manager of deliberately lying to them on many occasions. That's a red flag. That's a huge red flag right there. When you look at the ability that, we talk about the evaluations, they're very important, but we've all seen the evaluation, right? It's been online for a few weeks now. That's not an evaluation on any level or stretch. That would not fly on any private company or anywhere as an evaluation. And then also, if you look back about a year ago, there was an employee satisfaction survey that went out. And if you look at those results, that's another huge red flag to me that there's something wrong when so many do not choose to respond because of fear of being retaliated against. Many of them mentioned retaliation in their reviews. Those reviews from our employees about our city were not very good. And they were never published. We had to dig and ask for them. So again, things are getting hidden, they're not being put out, and those are huge red flags that we need a massive change in our managerial style.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna give each candidate 1 more minute on this question because I do think it's an important question. I do want to caution the audience, though, to let the candidates say what they think. And if you can kind of hold what you think, it's okay to applaud, but just hold what you think and let them have their say. So, Mr. Avila?
Well, I was just gonna I was actually gonna rebuttal before Mr. Shimkus spoke, and where was the second? I mean, I understand everybody's innocent until proven guilty, but my goodness, we've had several residents being harassed by this one person. I mean, what are we waiting for something else to happen? Do we need our residents to start walking out in felonies? I know residents that will not go to the podium because they're scared of code enforcement stopping at their house. They're scared that they're going to end up walking with a felony, or they're scared that they're going to be trespassed. Enough is enough. Our residents come first before any city manager. Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Herzberg?
So to address the city manager, the turnover, and the employees, I've been on the commission for 8 years. In those 8 years, I've worked with 4 city managers. This city has had 11 city managers in 23 years. And when you look at that, you realize the turnover and the instability that causes. when you turn over your manager every 2 to 3 years, you really only tread water as a municipality. And when a new manager comes in, the first year's a honeymoon period. After that, when changes start to be made, institutional employees are a lot of times not happy, and that happens in every organization. And sometimes it's very difficult for change, and that the rate Deltona is growing and the level of service that we have to provide, we have to have change. We're antiquated in a lot of ways. We're antiquated in communication. We're antiquated in code enforcement. We're antiquated in a lot, and change is hard for a lot of people.
Thank you. I thank you, and he thanks you. Mr. Shimkus.
So from the beginning of my campaign, one of the things I keep mentioning is we need to rebuild this rift between the government and the people. When I first got to Daytona, it was a very contentious every Monday in that city hall. And I was, look back at the tapes, you'll see my bald head in those little videos every time. It's a very contentious meeting. There's a lot of angst, there's a lot of argument, there's a lot of tension in there, and that has to be fixed. And it's important to realize that Ms. Herzberg is correct, that we have a city manager, council kind of form of government, but that requires a commission that is willing and able to give strong public direction to a city manager that includes very specific and measurable goals that they can then be held accountable for. If we as a people don't know what those goals are, or they're being done behind the scenes, we don't know what's going on, and that creates this feel of distrust and this idea that they're hiding things from us, and that's what keeps firing these people up about we have to figure out what's going on because it feels like everything's being hidden from us. So until we have a commission that is able and willing, again, to give that very strong public direction to our manager, things aren't going to change, no matter who's in that manager role.
All right, thank you. The next question, Ms. Herzberg, goes to you, and it's this $9 million facility, the Center at Deltona, is very nice. And I have to say again, the people were extremely helpful to us today in setting all of this up, and we greatly appreciate that. But its revenue projections when it opened in late 2017 were very aggressive. The center director at that time suggested the center could bring in close to $1 million annually. That far exceeded revenues for other nearby community centers. So the question is this: do you think the center can it ever break even? Is it bringing in enough revenue now to even break even? And is that a projection that a more modest projection would have been more realistic?
Well, absolutely. As a person, whether it's in my business or my personal life or my own finances, I always err on the side of caution. And when those projections came up, I felt they were very, very high. I felt they were personally high. But again, I'm very conservative, and I don't like to project things that are possibly unattainable goals. So when we mentioned earlier, we were talking about the debt service on this center is about $404,000 a year. The goal should be to go ahead and bring in as much revenue to cover that debt service. That would be my initial goal. And I believe we'll be on track to do that. When you look at that, we have more and more advertising going on with the center, more and more events held here. As a city of 90,000 people, and I know people have questioned the center and its use. We're a city of 90,000 people. We have basically no golf club or country club. We have no major restaurants that we can have anything like this in. We don't have a hotel that has this capability to have a wedding, to have other events in there, to have corporate dinners. And this facility now will draw those type of events, and it has. So I'm confident that over time, I feel we will definitely cover the debt service on that. We have 2 new individuals that both have a great amount of experience in hospitality and promotion, and that's truly what you need. I think initially, the center as a concept, I don't think that any of us realized the level that it would be, and I think now we're on the right track to go ahead and promote it as it should be. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Shimkus, service, what are the operating costs as well?
What are the operating costs? People have asked for the public records in the finance of this facility and have been continuously denied those records. They were told at one point they did not exist. We have been told by our city now that they have always existed. but it's a cat and mouse game. If they've existed, why haven't they been produced? Someone says they got a report that maybe we made $48,000 in the first 6 months. That's nowhere near the debt service, let alone the operational costs. And again, the original hiring of the manager for this facility is another red flag that our management is not really doing the right things. If you look at this person's resume, I don't understand how this person was ever considered for this job. And so we look at these continual failures along the way that may seem little on their own, but when they add up, they put us into this $9 million debt building that we absolutely have to work out how to work with it, but that has to come in play with turning it back into the community center that it was promised to be. We don't have the arcade, we don't have the basketball courts that were promised originally in this facility. We need to turn this back into a community center, and that needs to be done so that the community groups that are in Daytona can afford to use it. The cost for this room, can I ask you, Pat, what would this cost tonight? Those are the questions that people have, and that's the reason why it can't get used by our local citizens, because it's just priced way out of range for us.
And by the way, to anybody, we did pay for this room.
And what was that?
Including, I think it was somewhere south of $300 for the night, but that didn't include the cost for the microphones and for the screen. And so we have to figure that all in. And so I'm going to know at the end of it. And I actually paid for 2 days worth. And so we have to take that other day's worth. I meant to tell my publisher that. I'll tell you later, Bill. And figure out the microphone costs. So that's the best answer I can give you. And now to Mr. Avila.
So this building started off as the promise of a community center. You have to build a community before you can actually build a center for the community. We don't have a community, unfortunately, or any place that we can go and spend time as a community. Now we have this monstrosity, and the financials, they're probably still on the napkin. When he first came up, Mr. O'Donnell did and gave that report. Brian Sukup stood in that dais, and he was laughed at by every single one of those commissioners that are here today in the crowd and on this stage. They told him that, no, it's going to be cost neutral. They believed him out of something that was written on a napkin. Here we are today. We can't even get financials for this center. We don't know anything about the center except that sometimes it's busy, sometimes most of the time it's not. So I'm hoping that Lucinda and the other gentlemen actually do something and turn this thing around for the benefit of our community. This thing needs to start producing, and it needs to start producing fast.
Thank you. All right. We're going to go to the audience's questions again, because I kind of took a double on the Ms. Shang question. So let's go to Jamie for your second question.
Yeah, Pat, would you like us to raise some money to help the News Journal out for this cost?
We will take any money we can get.
Okay. Get a hold of Heidi. She can help you. Commissioner Herzberg, you've stated on several occasions some very public positions. You've signed the petition for the water audit, yet you haven't made a motion to actually do the water audit, although you could. You claim Jane Sheng should be afforded due process and haven't made a motion to have her even to be investigated about very, very serious charges of using law enforcement as a retaliation against citizens who criticize her. Yet, you could make the motion. Why haven't you made these motions to audit Deltona Water and another motion to investigate the accusations against Jane Sheng?
So thank you, Jamie. First of all, regarding the audit for Deltona Water, the audit, for clarification, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we audit Deltona Water through an outside company every year. It is audited, the rates are reviewed every 2 years. The audit that the group is requesting, Deltona Strong is requesting, is a state audit. It is an audit from the state auditor general. And several years ago, there were another group of people that wanted to audit the entire city through the state auditor general. I am not opposed to any type of audit. I support audits. However, the reason I have not made a motion, and I know that the group has also discussed this with Representative Santiago, The state has to go ahead and do all the reviewing and look over whether or not it even wants to take that on. You have to bring petitions forward, which you're in the process of doing. However, there's a tremendous cost to that audit. A tremendous cost to that audit. And I think that if we were to go ahead and go forward with that, the cost for that audit needs to be brought forth to the residents of Deltona, and everyone that's signing those petitions and wants that type of an audit, you have to understand who's going to be paying for that. And that needs to have clarification as well when you request something like that. And I'm not sure if, I can't tell you if the group has that cost for the audit. I don't.
Thank you. Just a question of clarification on that cost. Would that cost be borne by the city or the state?
Yes, any type of audit that the city, a municipality requests from the state auditor general, from the audit office, the municipality has to pay that. Generally, when the state gets involved, they get involved in a situation where a municipality is on the verge of bankruptcy, cannot function, and so forth. Then they step in and they'll do that type of an audit.
All right.
A request is on you to pay.
Okay.
They won't.
Mr. Shimkus?
Weird to answer questions for other people. I don't know why these motions haven't been made, as that was what the question was. But what I would say is, yes, the audit would cost the city the money, and I've heard anywhere $80,000, $100,000. I would.
You want this one?
I would then, as much as I'm all about reducing the debt, I would say this $14 million of unencumbered money that we've got sitting there that they keep wanting to find things to spend it on, I think an audit would be a really wonderful thing to spend that on to begin with. It's easy to dismiss the people that cry out because they are numerically a small number. You see the same faces who are crying out for things. So it's really easy to dismiss them. But when you start to talk to them, as I've done, I've talked to people across all different of these issues that have come up, I realize that their issues are valid. When you get a felony charge placed against you and didn't even know about it, I looked at the entire process of that happening. I talked to people. I didn't just take someone's word for it and go on from there. When someone gets trespassed from a building, I didn't just take someone's word for it. I looked at all the video that was available. I've looked at the police reports I could get my hands on. I've looked at a lot of this information, and it makes it very difficult to just dismiss that as not really an issue for anyone else. And if it's happening to a small number of people, chances are it could happen to a lot more, or it already has happened to a lot more. And we really need to make sure that we as a city understand that it's our responsibility to speak up for our neighbors and to make sure that these things are not okay.
Thank you. Mr. Avila?
It really isn't a small number if you think about it. There's a lot of residents that suffer through this issue all the time about their water, and they want to see the city audited. Again, they really are afraid, and it baffles me why they're afraid of a government that they have elected. This city has, thanks to Ms. Sheng, residents feel like, they don't have control anymore. So they're afraid about retaliation. I'll tell you what, we need to find a place to look for money to pay for the audit in Hurstburg. We can start by taking the money away from Team Volusia. We can start through there. I mean, if we want to get real about this, look, and I don't understand how the city doesn't figure this out. You want to get the trust from the people again? Give them the audit. What are we hiding? What are we hiding?
Thank you. We're going to go to the next question, and that's Ed LaSanta.
Yes, good evening again. Please name 4 other issues that are important to our city. Exclude, because it seems to be a very topic that they like to pound on it, excluding the center, sewer and water, and Mrs. Shang. I am personally involved in sports, and parks and recreation is a very important feature of this city. And they have invested a lot of money in a lot of parks, just as an example. So what other 4 issues do you think are important to our city? Thank you.
To which candidate?
All of them.
All right. We'll start with Mr. Avila.
So just to explain something, we pound on these issues because if we don't and we don't get it fixed, we're not going to have parks and recs or any type of sports things to do for our residents. So I just wanted to clarify that. Other important things, yeah, there's a lot of important things. Transparency. Why can't we get our records when we ask them? Crime seems to be going up. What's going on in that department? I mean, there's a range of things that seem to be happening. I, for one, try to bring a charter vocational school here to Deltona. Why was it sent to Daytona Beach, or why did they try to take it to Daytona Beach? Are our children here not worth a charter vocational school? I'm a firm believer in vocational schools. So there is a lot of things, and I understand your concern. But when we have people like Ms. Shane that's harassing our residents, we have issues of sewer, and we have issues of a center that is going to put us in the red every single year. We have to give those things a priority. Otherwise, we're not going to have any type of thing to do sports or anything other than that.
Thank you. Ms. Herzberg?
Okay, thank you. So I would say initially the number one issue that I would address is communication. I think that the city over the time has sorely been lacking in communicating not only its events, but all different things to the residents. I think that and not only to the residents, to the business community and to other municipalities. So we're antiquated in communication, we're antiquated with our IT department. All of that needs to be brought up. My suggestion is to go ahead and get a phone app for the residents that you can watch your commission meetings on, you can report trees down, you can report city issues, and you can pay your water bill. There are technology things out there that can bring the city together to have more of a sense of community, which we don't have here. That is one thing that we really struggle with. The other issue that we have, very, very, very severe, is infrastructure. We are lacking in infrastructure. And when you look at the debt that we've taken on through transportation bonds and stormwater, that is all an investment in infrastructure and in the future of Deltona. Because any one of us that are elected officials or vying to be an elected official, one of our goals should be sustainability for the city. And it should be for the future sustainability, not only for us, but for 5, 10, 20, 50 years down the road. We have a strategic plan. We're gearing toward that. We're doing parks. We're definitely looking to put in more fields and work with that. And we're also looking at, for my big goal, is to partner with outside companies. Let's partner with the private sector to go ahead and bring things into the city that we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shimkus.
So, number one that would not be mentioned in the list, it would be debt control. I think we really, really need to take a really hard look at the debt control and make some tough choices about maybe we're not going to build a new fancy thing over here, but that debt control is absolutely a very big issue. We also need to make sure that we can currently maintain the roads we have. I know we've gotten some that are getting resurfaced, and there's a process to that, but there are roads like Tivoli that have been in sorely need of being resurfaced and rebuilt. And we need to make sure that we understand that some of those roads are county roads and we have to work with them. So we need to understand that there's a big issue with the communication from the city and the county. There seems to be, and it's even been said on the current dais, we hear on several times about how the county council doesn't respond to our requests. They don't do anything maintaining our medians. They don't do a lot of things that the city is asking. So we need to definitely make sure that we're looking at building that relationship in a way that we can work together and get things accomplished that we need to get accomplished. Parks obviously are a huge thing. We have a lot of young people in our city. We have, I want to say, it's around 25,000 students and under 18, and it's critically important that we provide them with opportunities to be part of team sports and be part of those activities in the parks, and that those parks are safe and well maintained and provide the quality of resources that those children deserve. And after that, we also have issues with development. We have this whole area on 415 was part of this joint agreement that we had back in 2008 that hasn't really seen a lot of progress. But we need to be able to work through these processes to make sure that we're developing in the right areas, in the right industries.
All right, thank you. And we're going to go to the final audience question from Courtney Young.
All right, hi guys. Whoa, that was loud.
Not just me.
So tonight, Heidi, you've mentioned transparency and communication. Troy, you've mentioned records and accountability. Santiago, you've mentioned the fact that there are no financials and info for several things that have been requested. During other recent conversations between and among mayoral candidates and the people of Deltona, the phrase open door policy is often used. What does open door policy mean to you? And I'd like to start with Heidi.
So an open door policy to me means that I'm available. And as many of you know, I'm available to talk on the phone, to meet. I have no problem having an open door policy and meeting with anybody to talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. If you want to go ahead and have questions about financials, I will get the answers for you. If you have questions about what's going to happen with a park, with roads, I mean, that has always been my goal when I first got elected as commissioner, to go ahead and be open and to talk to the residents, because with 90,000 people in here, there are a lot of people that don't know what's going on, and I understand everyone is involved in their own personal lives, and a lot of times your issues come forward when it affects you. But we are here as your representatives. We are your voice. And for me, whatever it is that you need, I will try and get an answer, work with whoever I can, and have that open door policy for any constituent. It does not matter if you like me, if you don't like me, if you don't agree with what I say. I'll be happy to explain it to you and walk you through whatever it is that you need, that you have questions about. That's my open door policy.
Thank you. Mr. Shimkus.
So open door policy is one of those wonderful corporate buzzwords that we toss around just because it sounds great and it gives you a warm fuzzy. But to me, it's more than just, this idea that, yeah, you can talk to me. It's more a physical thing, It literally would mean that if you're at your office, your door is open if you're not on the phone or in a meeting, and anyone can walk into your office and have a conversation at any time. It's a way of being inviting. It's not just about being available to be called or emailed, but it's about opening an invite and talking and communication that's going to be open and honest as much as possible through all those processes. And part of this is, putting up barriers of glass and key card entry to our elected officials in our buildings doesn't really help build that trust, doesn't really help build that ability to communicate with the residents. And it's critically important that it's not just the elected officials that have to have that policy. It should be the norm policy for the city as a whole. When you go into City Hall, if the mayor is there, if one of the people are there in their office, that door should be open to you. You shouldn't have to make an appointment and come back and try to find someone with a key card. It should be a very open and accessible opportunity for residents to talk with their elected officials, as well as department heads or anyone else at the city that they need to, as much as they can. Because without that communication, without that possibility there, you're going to end up with what we have now, which is feelings of mistrust and that things are being hidden and that we don't have the right to know what's going on in our own city.
Thank you. Mr. Avila.
So open door policy, it's really sad that today in Deltona we have to talk about what an open door policy is. For me, one of the things that I think should be happening is, why aren't the commissioners and the mayor having regular town halls, whether it's quarterly, monthly? You have to be in communication with your residents. Absolutely. Another thing that I would love to see is whoever the new city manager is, if I get elected, I'd like them to sit down at least every week before whatever commission meeting gets done, and I want the residents to go in there and talk to the city manager, give them their grievances, what their problems are, so they can interact with residents, so they know what the residents are going through. That's part of having an open door policy. Public records request, man, if somebody does a public records request, I got 2 answers today. Please clarify your suggestion. Second answer was, well, that goes against the Homeland Security Act. I mean, just be transparent. Give them the records. I mean, that's part of being, having an open door policy. We need to have some type of system that is more modern, where if somebody does a records request, they can just order it online and they'll get it emailed right back. That'll save residents a lot of time. And again, just being open with the residents. If somebody wants to make an appointment, I mean, there's just so many, the definition is so broad, we shouldn't even have to be discussing this today. Be open to the residents, get their trust back. That simple.
All right, thank you. All right, we've got time. That concludes the questions from the audience, and we've got time for about 2 questions. That's provided that on the first question, you are as rapid as Mr. Avila was on the first question. So, the first question is this, and I'm going to address it to Mr. Shimkus first. Should the city of Deltona help to pay some of the costs for additional security in the public schools within the city?
I mean, short answer, yes. If you want the shortest answer, as a public school teacher myself in the past, and having many, many friends that are part of that, I think having a partnership between the schools and the city that the schools are in is critical. And I understand that there's been a lot of contention in that specific question this year, but it's important to know that it was the school board is asking for it as a kind of a stopgap until they have the opportunity, because it was an unfunded mandate. And it's important that we work with our schools and make sure that our children have the best opportunity to learn and not be worried about safety and security. So yes, I would.
Thank you. Mr. Avila?
Well, if our economic situation was very different, my answer would be different than the one I'm going to give. The answer is no. We have uncontrolled debt. We don't have money to pay for the center. I mean, I have a problem just handing over a blank check to a school system that currently can't even afford textbooks for their students. Without us being involved in some way, form, or fashion to tell that school board how that money is going to be used, the answer is no.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Herzberg?
Thank you. Yes, when this came forward, we received an informative letter that said we would like you to pay about either $103,000, $108,000 to cover the security for the elementary schools, which is not covered from the state. And it was my suggestion from the dais to put it in the budget. Whether the commission agreed with it or not, at that point, if you want to go on fact-finding things, see who's going to go ahead and pay it. If the state came down with money, I strongly feel that we need to budget that money. As it's been mentioned before, we have $12 million in unencumbered reserves. A one-shot deal of $108,000 for the safety of our elementary school children is not too big of a price to pay.
All right, thank you. And this is the final question. It's when it comes to recruiting business, attracting prospective businesses to the area, they say image is everything. And the city of Deltona's contentious relationship with a portion of the city's residents has attracted a lot of critical publicity. It's attracted critical stories in the press recently, and it's attracted a ton of critical comments on social media. And businesses looking to go somewhere, they look at that stuff. That matters to them. So the question is, how do you think all of that is impacting the perception of prospective businesses that might have interest in putting a footprint in Deltona? And as mayor, what would you do to overcome that image problem? Mr. Avila?
Well, it starts with leadership. If we're really concerned about what businesses are thinking, then we reelect no one on that dais. That simple, because they're part of the problem. All right? But leadership, that's what it takes. I mean, you know, we've been fighting about the same thing over and over again. And I hate to beat around the bush, but if Ms. Shane continues to be, you know, a lot of people don't know this. Ms. Shane wasn't even one of the finalists. She was brought back on board by Commissioner Nabik and Ms. Herzberg. Why? We had a lot of good applicants, a lot of good finalists, but she was brought back because supposedly our roads, she had experience with roads. How is that working out for the residents of Deltona? It's not working out. So we want to change the perception. We need to change the leadership. That simple.
Thank you. Ms. Herzberg, same question.
So I'd just like to tell a short story. When I first got elected, maybe I was in a year or so, and former Vice Mayor Trush was the city's representative to Team Volusia, and I became that after he chose not to run again. And at one meeting, we were at a Team Volusia meeting, and they had brought down a gentleman named Gray Swope, who was our economic development director, or their head guy that they had just brought in 6 months prior from Alabama. And as we stood there talking, he asked me where I was from. I said I was from the city of Deltona, and the one thing that he just looked at me, and he was only here six months in the state of Florida and was based in Tallahassee, and he looked at me and he said, "Stop the infighting. Stop the infighting. No one wants to come where there is an unstable government." And that was in 2012. 2012. Different commission, several different members, different manager. when you look at what went on in one of our neighboring cities, they had a medical park that was going to go in there. Because of the contentiousness among their council and manager and so forth, that all went away. So as your mayor, should I be fortunate enough to get elected, my first goal is going to be to make every effort to stop the contentiousness, bring in everybody together that has having issues with the city, and really try to work together with our neighboring cities, work together with the business community. That is what we need to do in Deltona, is show unity. Thank you.
Thank you.
So when you have a problem that's been going on since 2012 or earlier, you can be safe to say that it is a systemic issue. It doesn't fall on one person's shoulders. This is going to take a massive effort to change a lot about how our city operates. And like I've mentioned before, we need to look at our entire city management style and change that. We need to focus on customer service, not just between people wanting to build in Daytona, but between the residents and the commission. If you watch the commission videos, you're going to see a lot of things and hear a lot of things of the commission being dismissive to people that are coming up to speak to them. And it's that attitude that prevails when people feel like they're being disrespected before they even get up because of someone rolling their eyes or huffing at something or trying to say something under their breath that we all end up hearing. It's very divisive when those things are happening on a regular basis. The way we fix this, and I've been saying from the beginning of the campaign, is rebuilding this rift I've seen in the community is through communication like we've talked about, by getting out into the community, having town halls, making our meetings more approachable. If you have a family to care for and you can't get to that meeting at 6:30, you should have an opportunity to say your piece at the end of the meeting. So public comments shouldn't be just eliminated because you didn't get there on time. Workshops, when we have workshops and you have your 2 minutes if and only if we have the opportunity. Things like that are what build this contentious between the people and the government. And if we are constantly asking for records and getting denied or getting lowballed or highballed with prices, like they wanted $800 for me to get the count of how many water accounts were disconnected over the last few months, those things have to change, and that's a systemic change that we have to make in our city before anything else will change in the perception.
All right, thank you. Now, everybody, if you can just be patient, we have time for closing comments, and then, believe it or not, I think we're going to get out of here on time, so this is good. And we'll do that also in alphabetical order. So, Mr. Avila, you have 2 minutes.
So right before I decided to make my choice to run for office, I was at the water department with my lovely wife who's here in the audience. Rick, you raise your hand so people can know who you are. We were standing in line, and I'll never forget, and I've told this story to a couple of you before. There was a lady in front of us that was paying her water bill. She was on a fixed income, and the cashier told her that the amount to pay her water for it to be reconnected was a little bit over $400. It went from that to, well, you must have a leak, which is what most of us hear every time. And then the next thing she said was, well, I'm going to pay it, but it's going to be really hard for me because I'm on a fixed income, I'm on SSI, and I won't be able to buy much for food. She was later told that she needs to change her lifestyle to budget for things like this. You know, guys, a lot of residents in Deltona are on fixed incomes. A lot of people are. And we shouldn't have to be there fighting our government for anything. I remember another day I was sitting there in City Hall, and I heard our majestic mayor say to the residents, you guys need to be quiet because you're guests in this house. I am sorry, but elected officials are the ones that are the guests there, not the residents of Deltona. So I am running because I want to be able to represent you, the residents. If I'm lucky enough to serve you, the ones that did not vote for me, I will fight very hard to earn your respect, your trust, and your confidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Herzberg?
Disconnect the mic you're paying for here. So, as a resident of 35 years, I've lived in Deltona since 1983. I've lived here when it was 30-some thousand residents. I lived here when there was a 10-year fight for incorporation, and we incorporated with 55,000 residents. I've made my home here. I've worked elsewhere by virtue of what happened when we bought a business when I first moved down here and it wasn't in the city. So for all the 35 years that I've lived here, I have learned to A, love my community, and B, care about the people that live here. That's why initially I ran for office, because of small things that I felt I would like to do and give back to my community. That's morphed into a lot more. And I, like you, I'm a taxpayer here. I pay my water bill here. I'm on Deltona water. There's a big portion of the area of Deltona up in this area that isn't on Deltona water. It's on the county water system. My bills go to Deltona water. I pay storm water. I pay the same things you do. The level of debt that we have, the level of service that we have affects me just like it affects you. So whatever I choose to do and whatever I vote on is the same thing. The effect is the same on me as it is on you. I'm not exempt from that. I look at our city of 90,000 people, and you know what I see? I see diversity. And I say Deltona does diversity better than any other city in Volusia County and in this entire area. We're inclusive. We are a great group of people. Do we need help? Do we need to change things? Absolutely. I completely agree. We have a communication issue. We have a customer service issue in City Hall. I totally agree with that. Do we need to reach out more and bring the community to us and make it more inclusive from a government standpoint? Absolutely. Do we need more town halls? Absolutely. Do we need more inclusiveness with residents and get them to understand our form of government and help us understand what they want? Absolutely. And as your mayor, I will fight for all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shimkus.
So again, thanks for everyone for being here. It's been fun. I hope you guys had some fun with all the rain out there. I chose to run back in April. I know it's kind of late to the game because I made Deltona my home. I chose to make my home here, and I want my home here to be until I retire. And I want to make sure that what I'm getting into here is going to be sustainable. It's going to be there for the future. It's going to be a good and welcoming neighborhood for all of the people that are in Deltona. When I got here and we had those hurricanes a couple years ago, the neighbors that came out to help each other, it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It was great to see neighbors helping neighbors. And then I realized it didn't happen just at those hurricanes. It happens all the time. I see neighbors taking each other's trash out. Someone's going to trim their trees for their neighbor. They're going to do the grass mowing for someone who can't for that weekend. So much great people in Deltona are helping each other every day. And I want to make sure that we make our city something that's going to be sustainable. I want to make sure that this debt doesn't kind of bury us for the next 20 years and we end up as a bankrupt, failure city. I want to make sure that we take the steps to do deliberate planning to instigate our plans in a way that are sustainable, that we reach out to the community and that we rebuild this idea of this rift that's been happening. I want to make sure that we take the actions that we know we need to take to make sure that the people feel back and connected to their government so that we can make sure that our city is something to be proud of, that we pursue the great things like some opportunities in the education market, some opportunities in the energy market, some things that can make Deltona even better than it is today, and something that we can be proud of in the future and is going to sustain not only the people that we have right here, but the people in the future. We have 61% of our population is under 50. Those people are going to be raising families here, and they're going to want to retire here and be close to families. And I want to make sure, again, that we create a community that is inclusive, that we are informed about what's going on, and that we inspire each other every day to do something that's better for our neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We've reached the conclusion of tonight's debate, but before everybody gets up to leave, I want you to all give a big round of applause to all of these candidates for a really great job. Really, that was a really robust debate. That was great. I also have one announcement that I do want to share that I wish I didn't need to make. But due to a medical situation in Fred Lowry's family, we've had to postpone the District 5 Volusia County debate that was going to be taking place here on Thursday. Fred had to leave town. It involves a surgery for his father. I spoke to Dan Hunt, his opponent. He agreed that it made sense for us to postpone. We'll get something in the paper and up online if we reschedule, but I don't know that we're going to be able to. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. And with that, I just want to thank everyone, and especially the candidates again, and have a great night.